The February 4th meeting is called to order. We are meeting here at Holston under the rules of Governor Lee's executive order, trying to maintain socially distancing. We will open with a moment of silence. We don't have a flag here in the room, but we're going to open with a moment of silence. Then we will move into our agenda. And amen. First on our list is approval of the agenda, and when we approve the agenda, we are approving the consent agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion.
Dr. Rouse makes a motion.
As amended?
As amended.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a second by Mr. Iverson.
Okay.
There was an addition to the published agenda, so it's as amended and printed on the desk in front of you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is accepted. Next on our list is the public comment. I think we have one person signed up to speak here in front of us, and he'll be speaking up in front of the TV. This time we will ask Rodney Paget, who's coming in behind me, to go to the podium.
My name is Rodney Paget. Address is 1125 Gotland Shoals Road, Bluntville, Tennessee. The reason I was here tonight to speak it really has not got a whole lot to do with anything on the agenda. I hope that's okay. I had sent an email to you all earlier, I guess this week or last week one, expressing the concern that I have or maybe a wish. I do have a little bit of a self-serving reason for that, in that I've got one son coming into middle school and one going into Westridge as of next year. My concern that I addressed was the middle school curriculum, and requesting that you guys take a good kind of dive into maybe adding an advanced sort of track, advanced math or advanced ELA options for middle school kids. An example I gave you was Kingsport having, basically they do a placement test prior to sixth grade to see where the kids would fall, and they can either go into a generalized math or they can go into like an honors or advanced math program. And then if they do well with that in sixth grade and seventh grade, they can do algebra, and in eighth grade they can do geometry. I think a lot of, I'm on board with the school consolidations. I understand that those things were needed because we were having a hard time managing the amount of buildings that we had, and the inefficiencies of having, so many different classes that we had to get, teachers for and things like that. And we don't have a lot of help from the municipalities when it comes to renovations and things. So I understand the concept, with consolidation. But part of that should also, we give sacrifices in that we don't have the small community schools, and what we should get back out of that is, the better teacher pay, so that we can keep our teachers, especially our good ones, and not have them poached. And also what should come with that is when we buffer these schools in here and get all the middle schools into 3 schools, we should be able to offer some of these more advanced tracks as well. So for our sacrifice of not having the community schools, this is what I ask. I ask that we try to catch our curriculum up so that we are helping out the kids that are ahead of the curve, hopefully, which also will help the kids that are behind the curve, because they'll be able to have more attention to them as well. Off of that point, I think that's pretty much what I'll say about that. Off of that point, I'd also like to thank you guys for at least trying with the access road to the Westridge site. Whether that was the right answer or not, I honestly don't know. But I do feel like you guys gave it a good effort. I felt like that you tried, and that obviously didn't work out. So I appreciate that. And then one of the things I heard you talking about in the work session, which I would also like to encourage, I'd like to hear about, was setting some money aside to take care of things ahead of time rather than waiting until we have a need and then, you know, Katie barred the door, we got to go grab another rural debt bond or something like that to take care of it. I like the idea of squirreling away a little bit to take care of our athletics facilities, our school facilities, things like that, because we don't really have anybody else to rely on. It's coming out of your budget, it would seem. So I think we do have to do a little bit of that planning, which in the past it appears we haven't done well enough. So thank you all. I think that's pretty much it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pageant. Next, we go to communications to the board. I'm sorry, we have one written response that came in on website. Dr. Cox will read that first.
Yes, as Mr. Jones said, we did have one written response. We did provide our citizens the opportunity to provide written comment in lieu of coming to the meeting. So this is a response from Jessica Hall, and I'll read it just as written. I am a parent of a second grader and soon to be kindergartner. I am so furious that the board want to go back on their word about closing the school at the end of the year. After the last vote, my kids were excited that they would get to spend one more year at Bluntville, and my youngest one, especially because she gets to start the same school that her big sister did. Now, after all the confusion of 2020, 2021, I have to tell my kids that the school board lied and wants to go back on their vote. I am very ashamed right now. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. This time, we will go to communications to the board from the director's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jones. So under Director's Report, first, I just wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge that February is Black History Month, where we acknowledge and celebrate the many significant contributions to our country by African Americans. It's also School Board Appreciation Week, and this evening, board members have been honored with lots of messages, tokens of appreciation, and gifts. And so I would just ask each board member to hold up something, and I think so that our folks at home can see some of the things. We have some very nice self-portraits. We have lots of different gifts that have been presented, and we received some very nice thank you notes and emails. So to all of you who took time to say thank you to our board members, we certainly do appreciate that. And if I may just add a comment, school board members being a school board member is a role that a lot of people don't understand and don't understand the complexity. I really don't know of any other elected position that has all three branches of traditional government, executive, judicial, and legislative. Of course, a lot of the executive is entrusted into the director, but the school board has a huge legislative function in being policymakers. And also, they have a judicial role that a lot of people don't know, where they have to be an impartial panel and sit as a final arbiter in resolving matters of dispute. So it is a complicated role and a very important one, and school board members typically in their communities oversee the largest operating budget in their community. So lots of responsibility, but we want to say thank you to school board members for all of the awesome responsibilities that they oversee every day. The next item is the operating schedule update. So Mrs. Nave is helping us with the agenda. One thing that I forgot to say during School Board Appreciation Month, we have a video treat that we need to play before I continue with the agenda. So, Ms. Nave, if you would roll the video for us, please.
you for helping us. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Dr. Rouse. Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Thanks for helping us grow. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Thank you, Dr. Cox.
And that was a special video gift from Miller Perry Elementary School. And thank you, Ms. King, for reminding me of that. I almost forgot to recognize that. And I said, Ms. Nave is helping us with our video presentation this evening. So moving on then to item C is the operating schedule. And so one of the first documents I think is labeled the revised gymnasium capacity. And I just wanted to remind the board that the board took action back in December with the recommendation. That's when we went back to remote learning, and then at the time we specifically limited spectator audience to 4 family members per student athlete. Those restrictions are being lifted, so this evening I would ask the board to essentially rescind that portion, and my recommended motion to you is to limit spectator seating to 1/3 of the gymnasium seating capacity, inclusive of any pre-sold or otherwise authorized passes. So this brings us up then to the norm of our region. And so those people that have purchased the passes, those are still good. And then, of course, the TSSAA passes and the students. So this allows us to have a crowd capacity of up to 33% as recommended by TSSAA. So we just respectfully request the board to take that action at this time.
You've heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion to accept Dr. Cox's recommendation to go to 1/3 capacity for athletic events? Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Robinson. Any discussion?
Just a clarification, we're going up to 1/3?
Yes.
Okay, from,
Had been 4 per athlete.
okay. So it's gonna be a third,
Yeah.
it's gonna
It'll
be
be-
inclusive of that?
Yes,
It'll be a
of the-
third inclusive of that, yes.
Be a third of the capacity of the facility.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
This is just school sports, correct?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call, Ms. Keene.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then on that note, I do have some additional information. Of course, we had our weekly health department meeting, and just some continued good news. The positivity rate is down. We're still above that of the state, but the numbers are trending upward. And we have some good vaccination news. About 5% of all eligible folks have received their first dose of vaccine in Sullivan County, and just under 6 have received a second dose. That variation is due to people that live in different places, I guess, getting their shots. But the really good news is that we are really close in time to having a school staff vaccinated. We will have an announcement tomorrow that has hopefully some specific dates, and we'll be talking about that later on the agenda, where I'll be asking you to make a calendar change to accommodate so that our staff can get their shots. So staff will be notified tomorrow on February 5th, and this will be a joint announcement between Kingsport City Schools, Bristol City Schools, and Sullivan County Schools. And then we'll also be announcing the administration of the second dose with all the instructions that people need. So again, some really good news. And then the COVID worksheet is updated with the link in your agenda. So Next, we have the retirement incentive update, and so we do have more people that have decided to take advantage of that. Again, of course, the deadline is for February the 15th for anybody that wants to take advantage of that, but you can see the numbers have changed, and Ms. Navis put that up there. So we have 2 system-wide employees, 1 administrator, 13 elementary, 6 middle, and 9 high school, for a total now of 31. We do have some additional people that are inquiring. We think that before the deadline, we will have more people that will be taking advantage of that. Okay, so with that, are there any questions? Okay, that concludes Communications Board, the Director's report. Moving to unfinished business, we have before you policies for second reading that we talked about. They passed on first reading at the last meeting, and then we had them on the work session agenda, and we think we've answered questions. But if there aren't any more questions, I would respectfully request that the board approve all of the policies A through E on second reading as recommended by the policy committee.
You've heard the recommendation to approve these as grouped together. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Gilmore makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Iverson seconds the motion. Any discussion? Ms. King, roll call.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you. Under unfinished business, we have item B, which is a Sullivan East property lease. And last week at the work session, Mr. Hall spoke to that. I'm going to turn it over to him. We do recommend the approval of this lease agreement. Mr. Hall?
I don't have anything to add. Additionally, I did speak about it at the work session. It is a one-year renewable, but it can be terminated if we have a need to do that. So it does, the cost is $500 per year that we would be paid for that. Be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I recommend that you approve.
We have a recommendation to approve the lease for Sullivan East property. Do I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Dr. Rouse makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Iverson seconds the motion. Any discussion? Roll call, Ms. King.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item under unfinished business, item C, is Westridge Access Road update. So this evening, I think Mr. Jones has some remarks to make, and then we have some things to share with you by video. So, Mr. Jones, did you want to say something first? Okay.
I had hoped to put this on the agenda as a placeholder to make a more positive statement about the outcome of Tuesday night's special call meeting for Sullivan County Commissioners, but the news was not good. It was a 15-2 vote against us creating the access road to Westridge High School. But there was lots of things said during that meeting, if you listen to it, by individual county commissioners, and there's been other things said during this entire process about Lynn Road, Shipley Ferry Road, and the access road itself. But I felt like it was very important for you to hear facts, not emotion. And what we have tonight, what I have asked Dr. Cox to put on the screen are comments by individual commissioners, which is their words, not my words. I'm not putting together any words that they've said. There's other places you can find those in writing, but these are actual videos of comments that have been made during this time. And after the videos, you're going to see them in chronological order, I think, and I believe the first one is 2017, which was about 6 months after the bonds were issued for the building of West Ridge High School. And I think it's important to have a good timeline of different events as you look at the facts surrounding this access road. It's not a dead issue. I know we're at a dead end now with it. We've done all we can do, but there are some other things that's going to happen in the future. But please listen carefully. I know a lot of you maybe don't see the TV and hear the news, but listen carefully to the first video, which I believe is the County Commissioner Angie Stanley through WJHL TV. So, Ms. Nave.
Stenson at the top of their priority list. Elizabeth Kubel was at that meeting and joins us live from our Kingsport newsroom tonight with details.
Sarah, this is a project that would connect the Interstate 81 exit to the airport up to Highway 126, and county officials tell me that money would come from TDOT as well as from federal funds. So they say that today's vote is really a major step in the right direction to getting TDOT to pay attention to their proposal. Sullivan County Commissioners Monday morning gave their stamp of approval to urge the state.
We're asking for it to be added and to prioritize it up to the top.
At the top of the Improve Act list, transportation improvement projects. The plan includes a highway extension from where the airport parkway currently ends over to State Route 126.
The extension will be what's termed a super two-lane. This would be tremendous improvement in connectivity.
Not only that, Commissioner Angie Stanley, who sponsored the resolution, says it will help bypass interstate travel and, most importantly, provide a safer and more accessible route for students traveling to the new Sullivan County High School.
The roads now that these students will be traveling on, whether it's by car, by parent, or by bus, are little 1.5 lane curvy roads on little back country roads. It's my job as a county commissioner to make sure that every single student in Sullivan County has a safe way to and from school.
And with all commissioners backing Stanley in Monday's vote, she says the message is loud and clear.
It sent a big voice to Nashville saying that unanimously we voted in favor to this be put on the priority list.
Elizabeth Kubel, News Channel 11, in your corner.
The County Commission will now send their resolution to Nashville. Commissioner Stanley they hope to send it today.
We'll go to the second video.
Mr. Chairman, that was 2017?
That was 2017, I think in March or April 2017.
The Tennessee High girls volleyball team got quite the send-off, loading up the bus early this morning for their trip to the state.
Go Vikings.
I didn't do that intentionally, Dr. Rouse.
I thought that was for me.
Sullivan County leaders are at odds tonight over how to improve access to a soon-to-be-completed high school. Thanks for joining us tonight at 6. I'm Sarah Diamond.
And I'm Josh Smith. Last night, Sullivan County commissioners denied a proposal from the Board of Education and the county's highway department to build an alternate route to West Ridge High School. 1,700 students will attend the school this fall. One option involved purchasing an 8-acre plot of land between the Second Harvest Food Bank and the West Ridge High School site to build an access route off Jericho Drive.
The proposal also included an access gravel driveway from Henry Har Road. After last night's no vote, Kaylin Cluck asked commissioners and the school board what happens next.
Right, I'm told 1,700 to 1,900 students will be attending West Ridge High School this August. School board members tell me they're now out of options to build a new access road in time. Meanwhile, an existing road will be widened.
The narrow, hilly roads leading up to West Ridge High School have been a safety concern since 2016. Now there's 6 months until the new high school opens. Tuesday night, the Sullivan County Commission rejected the school board's latest proposal to take out $6 million in general obligation bonds and purchase land for an access road.
Obviously, we're disappointed that they chose not to support our resolution to build the access road. I feel that they have accepted the responsibility for safely getting our students to school.
Several commissioners like Dwight King have concerns.
There was no plans No estimates, no cost, nothing. All they're wanting to do is issue $6 million. I didn't feel like that it was a good option for the county to spend that kind of money, and it's school money, but it's still taxpayers' money.
Another issue commissioners saw, the land for the road would have been purchased from a private business group that includes former County Highway Commissioner Jim Beljury.
And that's what the commissioners were worried about. Is it a conflict of interest?
Plans will move forward to widen existing parts of Lynn Road in front of the high school to make it safer. Current Highway Commissioner Scott Murray leads the project. Now the question is, will improvements be done on time?
But hopefully we can get this wide and get it opened up for the opening of the new high school. I feel pretty confident we can get it done.
But without an access road, Director of Schools Dr. David Cox is still worried it won't be enough.
Widening Lynn Road certainly will help. No doubt about that. We're very thankful for that. But I don't think it's going to ameliorate all the concerns about the volume of traffic.
School and county leaders told me it still could be a possibility to build a gravel driveway leading up from Henry Har Road to the back of the high school in the future.
Ms. Nave, do we have the one for 2018 with next?
The Sullivan County Commission. In a close vote, commissioners said no to funding the design of a new road to connect Interstate 81 to the new Westridge High School near Tri-Cities Airport. Here's a look at the proposed roads that could have been built.
But without the funding, these are the roads students at the new Westridge High School site will have to use. Some fear they are not safe enough for student traffic.
News Channel 11's Justin Soto found out there's now talk of another way to improve safety. He's at the site of the future school.
Well, Scott Murray steps into office as Highway Commissioner coming up on September 1st. And he tells me improving the roads leading up to here at Westridge, where nearly 2,000 students will be, is a must. And it's at the very top of his to-do list. Making your way to the site of the new Westridge High School, you'll find that you'll be driving uphill and even downhill, with plenty of twists and turns along the way. Those are just some of the challenges incoming Highway Commissioner Scott Murray sees, but
I wasn't against the road, the new road. I was against using Highway Department funds to build it.
he feels he can make improvements to the roads they already have.
They need updated. The roads need to be widened, and they need to be shoulder, need to be put up. For instance, coming down from Browder down Lynn, we've got a major or a blind intersection there at Henry Har Road.
Down the street, Jeff Baker sees it differently. He's lived on Browder
since 1983. I just don't think it would be safe, especially for younger drivers, and the way the roads are curvy and very little, no shoulders on them.
He even took matters into his own hands.
We put some decorative stone over here to try and keep. We've had several cars run down in through our yard, and we've even had them get stuck and tear our fence out. It was probably almost a monthly issue.
Back at the school site, Murray pledges to make a difference.
My job is to make these roads, feeding this new school, as safe as possible. And that's what I intend to do.
I did reach out to Board of Education Chair Michael Hughes. He said he wasn't yet ready to comment on this story. Meanwhile, Westridge is coming up fall 2020. We're live in Sullivan County tonight. I'm Justin Soto, News Channel 11, in your corner.
Hold up on the last video just a second, Ms. Nave. Wanted you to see there the timeline 2017 when there was a presentation made to build the highway.
Virginia's attorney today filed a lawsuit against.
When there was a proposal made to build a highway from the 357 extension all the way over to Highway 126, part of that plan was to build the access road across Jericho Drive over to the school. That's the first time that Jericho Drive had been mentioned. Now, this was asking for federal money and for state money, and that was a TDOT proposal which was turned down. And the reason that 2017 is significant, the bonds were issued in 2016. Well, the bonds were approved in 2016. They actually weren't issued, I think, until the spring of 2017, maybe even March of 2017. At that time, we had an architect on duty, and you noticed in the video of 2018 there that we were actually breaking ground. Another important thing is that in 2018, I believe that was somewhere around May or June, maybe even April of 2018, when Scott Murray, as Highway Commissioner, was interviewed. He had just basically won the election because it was a primary election at that point, and the general election was in August. He did not take office until September of that year. But they interviewed him prior to his taking office, and he said the top priority was to make it safe for the students. At that time, the projected opening date of Westridge High School was August of 2020. That changed later when we were unable to get all the bids in on time. The bids were actually not signed, I think, until August the 1st of 2018. I believe that's correct, wasn't it, Mr. Hughes? The August the 1st of 2018. So the interview that was conducted there about the safety of the school was done prior to us signing the bid with J.A. Street to build the new high school. In the last 2.5 years, very little work has been done on Lynn Road. They have, I think, acquired some of the access to the rights-of-way because I noticed they've got flags up and a few things of that nature. But I point those out to say that Tuesday night, when the County Commission turned down our proposal, they basically assumed the responsibility for getting our students to school safely. They took it out, we had made the offer of, even though I didn't agree with spending the money for that, and I don't think anyone in this room agreed with that, but we 7-0 voted to do that because of the concern for the students. And I think that's important for us as a board to recognize, why we did it. I think it's important for the public to recognize why we did it. And this timeline shows you that for at least 2.5 years, we've been dealing with the road and nothing has been done. Now, last Tuesday night, they did commit that they were going to widen the road. And I know we have to accept that will happen. But my concern is that in 2.5 years, we haven't seen the progress. If we were here 2 years, if we were here now and they had been working on it for 1.5 years and we knew what the progress was, we might not would have had to make the recommendation we made, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. We spent many hours over in front of the County Commission answering all of their concerns. We tried to answer all concerns that they had an objection. Number one, they said a private partnership was not legal. We came back and changed that to actually a contract to purchase, and they said that circumvented the bid process. So we changed that by getting to purchase the property outright. So we made all 3 changes that they asked for, and then still, when it went back, it got only 2 votes. And the actual resolution was changed even Tuesday night, had to be, because the state had ruled that we had to do a design and then take the design and put it out for bid before we actually built the highway. And that's what the county commissioners had asked me, get a design first, and that's what the resolution was calling for. Resolution was written to say we get a design, and we could have gotten it with one of the engineers that we used, and it would have been a fairly quick process. It would probably taken a few weeks to have done, maybe a month, I don't know. But that was what was going to happen. There have been several stall tactics that's happened on the access road and on the road throughout this whole thing. And I'm laying this out there in public and on this board so that we know the details of what's happened. Dr. Rouse wasn't on board in 2017, and Mr. Robinson came on board in the fall of 2018, I believe, didn't you, Paul? Randy came on 2018. So some of these things happened prior to your being on the board. But the next video shows some results from the traffic study, and I would like for Ms. Nade to put that up and then talk about a few of those items there. I think that's important. Then you'll have an opportunity to say whatever you want to say concerning that. But it's important for us to have the facts and not the emotion part of it. Ms. Nave.
I'm sorry, did you want the video again, or do you just want the
traffic study?
The traffic study, I'd like for you to start with, I think it's page 6, and I'll go up to the screen and show a couple of things.
Page 6, the actual page 6 as printed at the bottom of the actual page, Ms. Nave.
Okay, hold it right there. This is Lynn Road is what the details here of this. And it's in your traffic study, and I think your traffic study is about 130 pages long or something of that nature. And a lot of those things doesn't mean a whole lot to me. But it gets down and starts talking about the radius of various parts of Lynn Road. And you'll notice it's got 120 feet all the way down to 215 feet. I think it's all the way down to 2,000 feet if it scrolled just a little more. And it has the traveling width here. And the traveling width varies from 19 feet up to 24 feet. It tells how much it needs to be recommended to widen it. Now, Scott Murray has a copy of this, and this tells you what it has to be widened to the minimum. And again, I don't know that much about the curvature here, but you're going to see something in just a minute that will cause you to go back to these numbers in your booklet. Go on down to page 7, Ms. Nave. Okay, okay. This comes to Shipley Ferry Road. And there's something that I forgot to mention, but there's on Lynn Road, there's a minimum stop and sight distance. And that is important. On this one here on Shipley Ferry, it's 178 feet is what we have. That's what's recommended. The distance is 250. So we don't satisfy the minimum. That's the sight distance of line of sight in front of you. And that is important. Now, on Lynn Road, it was even less than that. Ms. Navy, if you'll scroll back up on Lynn just a minute to look at that one. There you go. Hold it a second. Back down. Okay. 108 feet is what it needs to be, and it's 200 feet is what you need. So we don't meet the minimum sight distance on either one. Now scroll on down to the next page, Ms. Nave. Come down one more. You'll see, okay, go down to the conclusions. Okay. When considering the horizontal curvature of each route and the travel way width, there's concerns that buses will leave the edge of the roadway to stay within their lane. This is especially true for Lynn Road. Now, Mr. Murray knows that. He commented on that the other day. The back wheels will go off when you turn around the curves there. I think you have to have 5 feet. He said 6. I read in here somewhere it said 5. But you've got to widen the road to begin with to get it up to 24 feet minimum. Then you've got to add the 5 feet beyond that. The lack of shoulders on each route does not provide the needed support when the vehicles leave the asphalt surface. And that's critical when they leave the surface. The location of deficient sight distance on both routes are concerning with the anticipated volume of traffic. I believe the average amount of traffic on this study was 800 cars a day. Now we know that if we've got 1,700 students, that's twice right there what it is now, but it'd be twice each way because it's going to be morning and night. So it's going to be multiple whatever the 800 was here. It's not recommended that lighting be installed along Lynn Road or Shipley Ferry based on the review of historic crash data. They have to make those recommendations based on the wrecks, and there's not been that many to ask for that. But lighting should be considered at the entrance to the school if the pedestrian traffic is there. Now, these are conclusions. These are not recommendations. And I think it's important to look at the conclusions because you better believe that if somebody has an accident, they're going to say, well, what did the traffic study say? Conclusion, we've got a problem with the shoulders of the road. Now, Mr. Murray has said that he's going to make the road safe, and we have to take him at his words that he's going to make the road safer. He has to meet these standards here, so we need to know what they are. You all need to know what they are. Need to be able to look at those and say, this is what we needed. Next year when the school opens, you know, I don't want somebody coming before the board and saying, well, why didn't you know how wide the highway had to be? It's got to be a minimum of 24 feet is what I understand it in looking at this. And I think it takes 19 feet for 2 buses to pass. Is that right? Does anybody know? Now, this is above my pay grade. I know that. But it's important for us to know as much as we can about the facts. It's obvious the curves are there. Now, Mr. King, if you'll go back and go back and listen to the county commission meeting last Tuesday night. They said you can change the curvature of the road. I don't know if you can or not. They said you can change the slope. But something that I failed to mention here And if you go back and look at the chart one more time, Ms. Nate, if you go back up to Lynn Road, this may be boring to you, but I think it's important. Somewhere here in this, Lynn Road is at a maximum steepness of 10 degrees. Do you see that anywhere on that line, Karen? Scroll down just a little bit more. Here we go. Grade. Lynn Road within the study limit has a maximum grade of 10%, which is consistent with the recommended maximum grade of 10%. Shipley Ferry, I think, is a 7.5 degree grade, so it meets the limit. But we're already at the steepness here, and if you go down next to Henry Har Road off of Grouter, you'll see that it is pretty steep. And they call it the S curve as it goes around. But we're at the maximum steepness. We don't meet any minimum on the width. Can we do that? I hope so. But to me, that appears to be a lot of work that has to be done between now and August the 9th. And if it's not ready on August the 9th, who's going to hear about it? I know we are, but at the same time, I think it would behoove us to say all that we can to say, you promised to do it, it's got to get done. And if someone has other ideas on other things we can do, I'm all open to take it back to the county commission. I don't like getting beaten up any more than you all do, and we got whipped Tuesday night, 15-2. And I say whipped, I mean, it was like an athletic event. We gave it our best. We offered to spend our money, or we didn't offer to spend our money, we offered to commit paying for it for the next 10 or 15 years to do what we needed to do for the safety of our students. And I think we need to emphasize that there is a need. You saw the videos. They said there's a need. Now, at one point, and it's in the Bristol Herald Courier paper, Mr. Murray had said during his campaign that he was against the road being paid for by the highway department. At one point, he said he would consider, if he were elected, paying half of it with the school system. And that's in an article in the Bristol Herald Courier, and when they had a meeting, that he would consider paying half of it. Well, we were offering to pay the full amount of the access road, even though we didn't like it, even though it's really not part of our responsibility. But we can't give up trying. So if you've got other thoughts, as long as I'm chairman, I will take any of them that you have back to the county commission and take whatever beating we have to take to try to protect our students.
Mr. Jones, in your many conversations with county commissioners and committees, have they offered any explanation of this delay? I mean, they're on the record in 2017 as saying, it's my job. 2018, it's called a top priority. And 3 years later, here we sit. Has there been any explanation why this delay has occurred?
I think the answer was heard by Mr. King in that interview when he implied that the answer was political, when he said that he thought Mr. Belgeri had a conflict of interest, and he asked that question on Tuesday night at a county commission meeting, and the answer from Mr. Street, our county attorney, was, no. It's not a conflict of interest. No, it's not a conflict of interest. Matthew was online, I was online, Dr. Cox was online, I don't know if anyone else, were you online?
I was there.
You were there? Yeah. So you heard it, didn't you? It's not a conflict of interest because Mr. Belgeri is not a county employee, he's not an elected official, but it all comes down to politics. We cannot allow our students to be hand-tied, hog-tied, or whatever term you want to use by politics, and that's exactly what has happened. It was a political vote Tuesday night rather than a vote on what's best for our students. And I promised myself that I was going to abide by Proverbs 29:11 tonight, and I'm not sure I've done that, but you can go look it up. Facts, not emotion. You've heard the facts. You've heard a little bit of emotion from me, but it's facts. Dr. Cox just gave me the notes here. It takes 19 feet width for 2 buses to clear, and that only allows 2 inches of clearance. Are we going to have buses sideswiping each other if we don't get the roads widened enough? And I drive Lynn Road on a regular basis. I won't say a daily basis, but it's a regular basis. And it's a narrow road. Parts of it's more narrow than the other, but there's big curves. And I'm driving, a 20-foot vehicle, not a 65-foot, whatever it is, bus. I don't have any, Dr. Rouse?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say thank you to you and Dr. Cox and anyone else that helped pull together facts and figures and so forth, and your dedication to this project. I do feel like, I have never felt like we should spend our money to do that.
Right.
And like you said earlier, I think we all agree on that. However, we wanted to do what we felt was the right thing for every student attending the new high school. Politics for sure has gotten involved, or has been involved the entire time, let me go back and say. And so those of you that are watching, please make sure that you are informing your friends, the other people in your community, of exactly what the facts are and what has taken place. Just remember this as time goes by. Everyone needs to remember that the school board we tried to do everything they asked us to do. We came back and tried again and tried again. Spending money, this is not our job to build roads. That is not what the law dictates is our job. So people that are watching, please make sure you share within your communities and keep sharing and help us get the road fixed or a new road or whatever. But the public has got to step up and help us because they have not listened to the school board.
I had a question today of why doesn't the school board build a road down next to the old Sam's into the school? And my answer, that's what we were trying to do, but the word's not out there. And others have said, why did you wait 6 months before the school was open to do this? And it goes back. We've not waited 6 months. You saw the evidence in their own words tonight. We've not waited 6 months. We started in 2017. The first presentation was made by the Highway Commissioner in January or February of 2017 when he had a call meeting and school board members were there. We met at County Commission office and a grant was applied for. Now, it was turned down because it didn't meet all of the standards that they needed for that to go all the way over to Highway 126. But there's been lots of effort by lots of people to try to find a solution, and it's going to continue to try to find something. I'm going to ask you all tonight to make a motion, and you don't have to, but to make a motion to authorize Mr. Hull to investigate the process for eminent domain. There is another solution, and I don't know what the process is, but if the board will authorize him to investigate that and work with me to tell me what the procedure is, there is another possible solution on the horizon. But without that, it could not happen. And I understand if you don't want to do that, but I also understand the need for finding a way for our students to get in safely.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a few comments?
Yes.
I'd like to go back a little farther than 2017. I'm going to go back quite a bit farther than 2017. But first, I want to commend the board for putting aside our personal beliefs and politics clearly for the safety of the kids. No vote I'll ever, it was against my every instinct to spend our money on that project. But it's not going to be good enough next year to say it was somebody else's job. And it says a lot for this group. In 2016, December 14, 14 county commissioners voted to build the school.
Is your mic
2016, December, can you hear? 2016, on December the 14th, or December the 12th, I think it was, but 14 commissioners voted to build the school. At that point, I took the time, and we do have quite a few board members. I would encourage everyone, and I have a copy, and I'll get anyone that wants a copy, to go back and read the resolution. I've read every word. I read every word before the process began, and I thought I understood it. So Mr. Jones and myself went and asked a top county official. The resolution does not mention the word we said. It does not mention the road at all. We were told, don't worry about that. That's the Highways Department job. We'll take care of that. So you see these comments that people that really don't keep up, but they see bits and pieces in the news, and they say things like, why didn't you fix the road before you bought the property? Well, you know, that's not the way it works. You can't go out and build a road to a 100-acre piece of property and then go and buy it. And, you know, you see comments like, why didn't you pick a piece of property in a better location? We looked at a lot of locations, but, you know, it was like with the middle school. There's only a certain number of 100-track locations that would logistically do the job for all the schools involved. And none of them, there's never probably going to be a case where a piece of property like that's going to be ready for that many students. Any place you would have picked would have had to have attention to the road. But Ms. Rouse mentioned it's not our job to do it, and it's not. And there's many years of precedents been set about who will build roads. And we've mentioned this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. In July of 1999, the commission voted to pay for first one half and then come back and pay for the rest of the road to what was then Northeast State. So they've not only built roads for county schools, but they built roads for college. So historically, we've done everything that we could do to try to get a road to that property. It turned political just after the vote. Some of the people started thinking about their elections instead of thinking about their jobs. They still think it's advantageous to them. Several in this room have been elected repeatedly after the schools were voted on and in the process of being built. But no matter what you believe, you know, I did not vote for this specific school plan. But after the vote, it was my plan. And you're not going to get 24 commissioners or 7 board members to agree on every location or any plan. After a decision is made to go in a certain direction, whether you agree or not, it's your job to see it through. And this is the county commission's job to see it through. Whether they agreed with it or not, a county commission duly elected by the people voted for it. And Mr. Jones, I'd like to also thank you for reminding me of those videos. It puts everything in perspective. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Is any board member willing to make a motion to authorize Mr. Hull to pursue the procedure for eminent domain? If not, I'll make the motion and see if we can get a second on it.
I'll second it.
Dr. Rouse seconds the motion, and the motion is just simply to ask him to investigate the legal process for eminent domain and report back to us what that process is. Any comments or questions? Any discussion?
I'll make one comment. A lot of times we've talked about this, and I think we all agree that it's not the school system's job to, I don't know if it's better or not. Okay. Okay. We made several comments. I think most of us made the same comment, and I definitely did at our last meeting, is that I don't believe at all it's our job as a Board of Education to do the road. I do agree that something needs to be done, and that's why I went with the last decision. But this, I think, is too far. I really don't think eminent domain is anything that the school board needs to look at, because that's us claiming property, and I just can't really support that. But I understand your process. I understand that you're looking just at options, but that's one option I would not be in favor of.
Let me tell you what I know about eminent domain. And one is the school system can do it because that's legal. It has to be done for a reason, for educational purpose, which the road is a legal right for that. You have to pay the market rate for the land. It's not a matter of going in and taking it at a cheap price. It has to be agreed to. The price has to be agreed to, and you can go ahead and take it and move forward and then agree to the price after you've settled whatever you need to settle. I don't believe in eminent domain either, but I believe in the safety of our students. And if you look at coming in off of Jericho Drive, there's about 3 pieces of property there. I don't know that any of them are the best route to go in, but there has to be a way of getting in. And does it mean negotiating with somebody to buy it? County Commission probably wouldn't approve us to use our money to buy it, but we need to know what our options are should that come up, because it's been mentioned to me by some county commissioners of go ahead and use eminent domain and secure some property. I don't know if that is sincere, but before I would even answer them, I'd want to know what the procedure was. And you can read on it, and I know Matthew could tell me probably, and Pat could tell me, but I would still like for it to be to the board, because it wouldn't do any good for me to know it and talk to a county commissioner, because it would have to be something that this board would act on. As far as agreeing to it, excuse me, I don't agree with it any more than I agree with paying the $6 million out of school system money. I don't think that's right. But I do know that if they extend Highway 357 ever, there is a possibility that they're going to go in by eminent domain and take property to actually get over to Highway 126. And one of the pieces of property that they possibly could take, according to what they have published, is my property. Do I like that? No, not in the least. But it's on one of those routes that have been published. And if they voted to do that, I would not have any choice. But wouldn't like it in the least. But I'd want to know what the process was. So we have a motion and a second. And Mike?
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Iverson. I don't like the idea of eminent domain, but I would support seeing the options. And one caveat in this case is the fact that this land's already for sale that we're talking about. And I would yield to Mr. Spivey, because I'm sure he knows more about it than I do, but there's a provision in the eminent domain law that provides that you set back more than what is expected to be the price of the property during the process. So if we've got that property on hold, there's enough money, there's more than enough money to pay any expected cost for it. And they may even come out better in this case. But it would help us kind of lock it in until we got to the point where we maybe had more reasonable people to deal with or saw better options. We'd hate to see this piece of property get away and go somewhere else, and then everybody have the epiphany that we should build a road.
Yeah, and I'm not even looking at this piece of property. I'm just saying that there's only 3 plats or plots, I'm not sure which the plats is what I call it, of property that's on Lynn Road there. I mean, 3 different owners. One's Waste Management, and then there's 2 others, this being one of them, and then there's another one on the other side. And when the county commissioners asked me about it, I said, I don't know. It's one of those things, and they weren't talking about the property we were just looking at as far as the 8 acres. They were talking about some of the others.
I know which one you're talking about now.
So I bring it to you. I pretty much have promised that if I know something, you're going to know it. That's as transparent as I know how to be, unless somebody tells me something in confidence. Dr. Rouse.
I guess my concern would be for anywhere between 3 and 5 years now, we've been told all sorts of things. So when commissioners are leading you to believe that, hey, you do this, we might do that. I guess I just don't have any faith that we could hold true to that would happen, whatever they told us.
I totally understand that.
Well, I know something about it. And Mr. Hughes is right. Basically, you would have it appraised and you have to deposit the money with the court and get an order from the court changing the title over to the Board of Education. And if the people aren't willing to accept that amount, they're entitled to have a jury trial to set the amount of the purchase. But you're able to get the property and move ahead with your project while all the legal aspects are going on. Now, obviously that's not something anybody really likes, but many of us drove over here on the interstate tonight, and I guarantee you it wouldn't be there if it weren't for eminent domain. It's done all over the place, and so it's not a drastic, unheard of legal proceeding. There have been hundreds of eminent domain cases here in Sullivan County. On the other hand, I'm not sure how that helps us. If we want that property, we can have it just by buying it right now. Obviously, that didn't last forever.
I'm not sure, and the reason I throw it out there, if there were to be a recommendation from another part of our government to pay for part of it, if we took eminent domain as a way of getting that, I would want to know what the answer is if they made that offer. And that's not been made. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, we can certainly put together that information for you, but it's going to be generally what I told you.
Right. But unless the board voted to do it, I don't really want to pursue even the thought process, because the next commissioner had asked me if the board says no tonight, I'll say, well, the board's not interested in anything other than what we discussed to begin with. And I'm okay with that. You all need to know what I know, and what the options are. We know option number one, we got shot down 15-2. Do we look at any other options should that opportunity come up in the future? We can say no, that's it. Or we can say, let's get more information. And all I'm asking for is a vote to do that. Because again, if someone mentions it to me and I know that you all are against it 4-3 or 5-2, I'm not going to waste my time of talking about it with them. But I'll leave it at that.
If we had the property, would we be allowed to improve the road? Would that still require permission and authorization from them?
Before we could even take it by eminent domain, we'd have to have county commission approval to buy it, because we have to transfer the money. I'm just trying to look ahead. Should the county commission come around and say, we're okay if you use another access point and we will approve it, or we'll even help you do it. I don't know that that's a possibility, but I want us to be as open-minded as we can to see what our options are. It's kind of like a multiple choice test. Sometimes if it's a short answer test, you got one answer. If you don't know the answer, you've missed it. But if it's a multiple choice test, sometimes you get lucky. And I don't know if this one's multiple choice or if it was short answer and the answer last week was the final answer or not. It was our final answer because that's the only answer we have right now. But should the opportunity come up for another avenue, would we be interested in pursuing it is what I'm trying to figure out. And I know I've hit you all cold with that because I had not talked with any board member at all, or Dr. Cox, either one, about this, but it has been mentioned.
Well, normally I would say 100% no, but I would point out first, thank you, Mr. Jones, for that timeline, and I would hope that people will go back and actually look at the facts of how long this has been going on, because I've gotten those same comments, those same questions. Why would you not have designed the road? School boards don't build roads. They don't design roads. That's not in their job description. There's actually, a department for that. It's called the Highway Department. And B, everything that this board does and has done, when we move money around, even if we have the money to buy it, when we change a category, the county commission has to approve it. So that historical timeline is pretty important to look at. And I truly believe, much more so than 5 years ago when I was first on the board, that the public is starting to see what the real problem is. When you have the whole school board united 7-0 voting to do something that none of us want to do, and none of us want to spend the school system's general purpose funds that should be used for education on building the road, but we're left with no other option because, luckily, there are videos, there are interviews, there are county commissioners and there are highway department commissioners accepting this responsibility and saying they're going to make sure it's done. Well, these bonds were issued. Everyone knew where Westridge High School was going to be when the bonds were voted on in December of 2016. And here we are in February of 2021, and other than a few flags on the road and obtaining a little bit of right-of-way, they haven't even widened a single road out there, much less provided access. So that's a long way of saying I agree with Mr. Iverson, I agree with Mr. Hughes. I'm not in favor of eminent domain. It's not it's not something that many people in politics like to use. Mr. Hull is exactly right. It's used throughout every state and in Sullivan County, likely on a daily basis. You just don't hear about it. That's how roads do get built. But we shouldn't be the ones having to have this discussion. And that's not to abdicate any responsibility, because we are having this discussion. And that's why it's important to have it, because for some reason, the county commission won't have this discussion, and they won't call the highway department commissioner up to talk about it. I can guarantee you, folks, if you look back over the way this school board has been treated since I've been on it, we sure get called out, whether we're there or not. Heck, half the commissioners don't even know what committee meetings go on, and that we've presented these issues, and Mr. Jones and Mr. Cox were at every single one to answer every single question. And I have suspicions about what they're trying to do. They're trying to make us talk about eminent domain because they're too political. Well, I don't care about the politics of it. I'm here to represent the students and the teachers in our community of Sullivan County, so I'll talk about it since nobody else wants to do their job, and I thank Mr. Jones for bringing it up. Sadly, I've even had county commissioners who don't have the gumption to talk about this in public basically imply the same thing. Well, there's another way to do it. You all just go do it. They're not going to do it. They're not going to say they support it because they're too worried about getting reelected. You know what? I didn't do this to get reelected. I did this to try to help people. I don't care if I ever get reelected again. This is just sad. Sad. And it doesn't matter who you like or who you support for county commission or who you support for highway commission. The results of this are just sad. And what's even sadder is that they continue to play politics. They continue to feed these rumors of why wouldn't you design the school with the road? Well, the same people that complained about the location of the school and that were always against it and have spent the past 5 years doing everything within their power to hamstring this community, because once a thing is approved, we all have to live with it. They've spent the majority of their time feeding these kinds of rumors. But the sad part is they were the same people that said there's not a single safe road. Then they go and they say, we're going to take care of it. Well, the reason we have to spend so much time on this is here we sit 5.5, 6 months away and nobody's taking care of it. So, I mean, what I said, I probably definitely didn't follow Mr. Jones' proverbs or take the emotion out of it, but it's, nothing's happening. It's crazy. I mean, I try to explain this to people, and they're scratching their heads, and it's almost like they don't want to believe what we're saying. I mean, but the good thing is there are interviews. There are actually recorded meetings. I mean, we were always led to believe that this was going to be taken care of, back to Mr. Hughes' point, which, of course, it should be, whether you agree with it or not. If you're on the county commission or you're part of the highway department and bonds are issued and a school's being built, your job is to provide safe access. I mean, it's that simple. This is not, people, I feel like the politics of it, they've made it too complicated. It's pretty simple. I mean, nowhere in our job description does it say that we build roads or plan them or that we should regularly have to exercise eminent domain. But I guess regardless of how you feel about any member of this board, if you're in the public, just know at least we care enough to not care how that affects whether we get reelected. And I want to stress that. This is not about us playing politics. It has to come to this point where we talk about it in public, because that's what we're supposed to do, except we shouldn't be the body talking about it. So go back and watch that county commission meeting that was special called on Tuesday night and look at the high-level discussion that they had. And I'm being sarcastic. There wasn't any. The conflict of interest that you saw in the interview after the vote, the county attorney said there is no conflict of interest. I mean, they want to mislead and confuse you, and the very same people that were against this school, now they're playing politics with the safety of your children, and it's time to acknowledge that. They've had 5 years to play them. Let's fix it. We've done everything we can, so certainly I would authorize Mr. Hull to at least investigate that, because until they come out publicly and talk about this and tell us what they're going to do and said we'll take care of it, well, what's been taken care of so far, folks?
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
when I challenged everyone to read the resolution, I would like to tell them to particularly pay close to some of the language, because some of that resolution is still yet to be lived up to. That has to do with funding and other things. So please take the time to read the resolution. That was put forth in 2016. I'm looking at it here. I'm not going to bore everybody with a new set of details, but it gets to Matthew's point.
I think there's so many times that we don't study the details of things that's before us. I think we're all guilty of that. And I would challenge us to study those details. And I don't like being played by anyone, and I don't think anyone in this room does. And the only way to keep from being played is to know the facts, study the facts. And I think we accomplished what I wanted to accomplish tonight on eminent domain, but I'm still going to ask Ms. Keene for a roll call on it, because it needs to be out on the table and not behind closed doors. So, Ms. Keene, roll call on that motion, and the motion is simply to ask Mr. Hull to report back to us on any procedures that we would need to follow should we be faced with that as an option.
Mr. Iverson?
No.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
No.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2. And again, I do not like the eminent domain, but all options need to be on the table for whatever the future. And I would say to you, we've built the first high school in this area. I don't know how many years it's been. 1968, DB was built. 1980, North and South were built. And to my knowledge, those were the last ones. DB and Crockett, Daniel Boone and Crockett, I think were before that or about the same time. And there probably won't be another high school in this area built in anyone's lifetime in this room. I'm talking about high school, not a school, but a high school. It's a major undertaking, and we should be able to celebrate the building of one of the best high schools around, and a lot of the pleasure and the enjoyment of building this building has been taken out because of politics, because of political maneuvering, and it's time for that to stop. The school is almost finished. It's scheduled to open on August 1st, August the 9th, I think is the first day for students. And it will be sad if it opens with no separate driveway to the back, or at the very least, a gravel driveway to the back. It can be so much more, but it's up to us to push that. We've got big challenges ahead of us for the next 5 months, 6 months, but any other comments on the West Ridge Access Road update?
I'll just say this, Mr. Spivey used the word sad several times, and so did you. What'll be really sad is if this road is not fixed properly, and one of our moments of silence is dedicated to a student or staff member who lost their life because they had to go to school on an unsafe road. And that's just the way it could be if this is not addressed properly.
The gentleman that was interviewed there on that video clip, his house is maybe 30 feet away from the edge of Lynn Road, and I may not have the distance right, but he lives right in the curve, and it's very close. There's another house that's even closer than that to the edge of Lynn Road, and one of them has a barn that's probably 10 feet off the edge of Lynn Road, and it's going to be a challenge for Mr. Murray, and I hope that he has the people on board to do that. We've got to believe that he does, but at the same time, we've got to hold him accountable too, just like they are holding us accountable to make sure that the building is built. And we've got to keep the public informed. Dr. Cox, new business.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Moving to a new business, the first item, 7A, is consideration of the 5-year plan. Just to recap a little bit, we are required to have a 5-year strategic plan. The current plan, or the most recent plan, spanned from 2015 to 2020. We have to have a board-approved plan in place to complete our district improvement plan, and this is basically a cornerstone or linchpin, however you want to say it, for all the other work. We spent a lot of time in the work session talking about it, but basically you have two versions. What I call the strike-through version preserves all of the language of the current, or the 2015 version, I'll call it, and then new language is inserted. You also have a cleaned-up version. This is a basic plan. We tried to write it with simplicity but clarity. And I would just say that there's nothing that in approving this tonight, which I'm recommending, that precludes the board from revisiting at any point along the way in the 5-year period. So if you, even 6 months from now, said we'd like to update our 5-year plan, the board can do that. So I want to thank our staff, our lead team, who worked very hard to bring this plan current with all the work that's going on, and recognizing lots of changes that have taken place in the 5-year plan. So, Mr. Jones, I do respectfully request this evening that the board approve the 5-year plan as presented.
You've heard Dr. Koch's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Dr. Rouse makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hughes makes a second. Any discussion? If not, roll call. Ms. King?
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Iverson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 7B is approval of new and renewed courses or special courses. Again, last week we talked about this in the work session. We do need the board's approval for these courses so that we can submit them to the state by a March 1 deadline. And we had discussion about that last time. So without any further delay, I would respectfully request that the board approve the new and renewed courses as presented and recommended by our lead team.
You've heard Dr. Cox's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I'll second.
Who made the motion? Mr. Robinson makes the motion. Mr. Spivey seconds the motion for the approval of the new and renewed special courses. Any discussion? If not, roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Thank you. We move now to item C, consideration of bids for turf for West Ridge High School and for Sullivan East High School. So last week during the work session, we had Jason Pollard, who was our consultant, and Deneen West, our architect, share some information. We had discussion and we have some follow-up information. The recommendation that I made to you last week is still the same. This evening I am recommending that the board award the bids in the total amount of $2,165,509, total of which $1,136,205 is for the West Ridge project and $1,029,304 for East. Now, this evening, I'm recommending that we go ahead and proceed with the bids for the turf, and we'll get some additional explanation. We will recommend to proceed with the complete refurbishment of the track at East. We have some outlying information. I would further recommend that you would authorize the executive committee to go ahead and accept bids and proposal not to exceed $400,000 for the complete replacement of asphalt and latex surface at Sullivan East. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Deneen West, who will give some detailed information, and Mr. Pollard about that recommendation. Ms. West?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cox. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just to echo what you were saying, we do want to recommend that you guys move forward with the artificial turf. And we know that we have some other discussion that we're going to talk to tonight about the track at East. But one of the big reasons why we want to try to go ahead and move forward with the artificial turf portion of it is that we have long lead times for the turf, and we had told the contractors during the pre-bid that we would tentatively issue a notice to proceed tomorrow. And they have based their information on their pricing and their construction schedules on that information. So as we get further into talking about the track, we just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone. So last time there were a couple of things that were brought to the table. The biggest item was at East, the discussion about the track, and there were several options that Jason Pollard presented. And so we are going to recommend that you go with price option number 2. And I'm assuming that everybody still has that information in front of them so they know what that is, but that was from the information that we talked about in the work session. Price option number 2 was to dig out all the asphalt outside of the field and rebuild the track and other asphalt areas with 6-inch crushed stone base, 2-inch binder course, and 1.5 inches surface mix asphalt. We had estimated that to be $279,000. And then also you would have to add the surfacing as well, which was $113,000, and that was for the black color because the red color was a little bit more. So the budget estimate is $392,000. And so in order to get an accurate price, CHA needs to do further drawings because that was not part of the construction document package. So they would need to complete those drawings and give that to the low bidder, which is Field Turf, and get a cost estimate back. So that is what Dr. Cox had said, if you guys would recommend that the executive committee would take that as an action item. And then there were a few other items that we discussed, or another item that came up was that the East coach recommended that we move the long and triple jump runways to the north D zone. And one of the reasons for that was that at the south zone, it was further away from the school. And also, if you remember the discussion that we talked about, there's some trees on that end of the track and that they shade the track. And so for those couple of reasons, they felt like they would like to move it to the other side. And so we have not presented that yet to the contractor, but we feel like that would be about a wash. We hope that's what it would be. And then we also had another item that the principal brought up, that they would like to change the logo at midfield and also on the end zones. The logo that we had used was just the Patriot head, and they would like to incorporate the letters S and E for Sullivan East Patriots. So we're going to look at that as well. And then there was another item that came up that Dr. Ierson brought up that was to further investigate the widening of the track. And if it was not possible to widen the track, to at least add some lanes along the straightaway. So I am going to let Jason Pollard talk a little bit more about that option.
Yeah, thanks, Deneen. And I appreciate you diving into all the details there and doing a lot of work for me. But I will discuss the idea of potentially widening the track on the straightaway. We did look at it further, and after investigating it, there are two existing sports light poles on the west side of the track that unfortunately are kind of the limiting factor to adding two additional lanes to the track. The southwest pole in particular does not allow for those two lanes. And on top of that, unfortunately, the national high school regulations require a 1 meter clearance for a safety zone outside of all lanes. And so not only do those two lanes not fit, but it also, of course, would not include the 1 meter safety zone that is required. So I guess it was our interpretation that the idea of moving those two existing sports light poles would not be cost prohibitive at this point. So I just wanted to report back on that.
Okay, so that again, to recap our recommendation, it is to go ahead and proceed with the bids for Field Turf, for the bid, so we can issue a notice to proceed, and then to essentially approve the work to, pending all the things that were discussed this evening, authorize the executive committee to move forward with the replacement of the track to include the asphalt and the latex surface for the east track. So, Mr. Jones, that's my recommendation.
And that's up to a limit of $400,000.
Up to $400,000, yes.
And there was also a $10,000 credit, I believe, on the 392. So when everything comes back in, we are hopeful that it will be under the $400,000. But if it's more than $400,000, we'd do a special call meeting and come back, and the board would vote on that. So his motion then is to approve the turf for both fields at a total cost of $2,165,509, and then to approve East Track up to $400,000 with the executive committee making the decision as long as it's up to that amount. And if it's more than that amount, we'd come back for a call meeting on the track part.
I make the motion.
Mr. Hughes makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Robinson seconds the motion. Any questions? Any discussion?
Yes. Just one question, with the principal asking at Sullivan East to change the logo, what does that do? I mean, I'm fine with it. I just wonder, what will that do with the process? Does that still continue, or does it delay it?
According to what Deneen said this afternoon, I think would be no change and probably no change in cost. Just adding an SE would be, yes. Of course, there could be a cost factor we don't know about, but right now and I don't think it would slow the process down.
Is that something we need to make a motion on also, or something we need to include in this, or can it be just continued without?
It can be continued without, but if you want to put it in the record, we can. It's not a.
Yeah, I actually would like to do that so they can take a look at it. So if it needs to be on there, I'd like to put it on.
Okay. So the motion would be amended that the east track would have the logo of the Patriot head with the SE, I believe, on it, and up to a price of $400,000. We probably need to vote on that as an amendment, I guess, to make everything legal. So the amended motion is to follow through with what Dr. Koch's recommendation is with the change on the east track to add the logo as the Patriot head with the SE, again with the limit of $400,000. So Mr. Iverson has the motion. To have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hughes. We're voting on the amendment first, then we'll go back and vote on the other part. Ms. King?
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Iverson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey.
Yes.
The amendment passes, so now we will vote on the total resolution. Ms. King?
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Iverson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse.
Yes.
Mr. Spivey.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, my understanding is item D has been removed from this evening's agenda, the Westridge swimming pool. So we move next to item E, high school assistant coaches. And last week at the work session, we explained that we needed board approval to differentiate the number of assistant coaches per sport. You have that information. Also, it is a net decrease of the total number of coaches, but we wanted to, I guess, right-size the coaching staff based on the size of the school. And you have that before you on the agenda pack. So this evening, I do respectfully request that the board approve the recommendation brought forward for the assistant coaching staffing for Sullivan East and West Ridge High School.
You've heard the recommendation to approve the number of coaches as listed in the chart on the proposal last Thursday night. Do I have a motion? I heard someone.
Not your first and second, but just those two.
Mr. Gilmore makes the motion, Mr. Spivey Mr. Robinson seconds.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take it. Mr. Gilmore makes the motion, Mr. Robinson seconds to honor the request to increase the number of coaches basically at West Ridge according to the chart that was presented. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do we have, I guess I would have appreciated having some financial figures with this as well, savings and cost, and, I mean, is that anything that was worked up with this as you did it?
No, it didn't. It's going to be hard to calculate because depending on who's in the position, people are paid different amounts based on longevity and those other factors. We do have a net reduction, I think, of 75 total positions. I don't have a precise dollar figure.
Okay. Thank you.
And the athletic committee did convene to consider this.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
It's it was a net reduction of 73. When
Yeah,
we did
73, yes.
Yeah, we actually did look at it, and we all agreed that some coaches need to be added here and there. So it's 73 in the reduction now.
Thank you.
And that was both middle school and high school, right?
This is just high school.
Just high school?
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Ireson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse.
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We're now to item F.
1 minute break.
Oh,
Five-minute break.
Okay.
I know that one might take a while, and I need to use the restroom.
All right, we're taking a break.
We're in a 5-minute recess. We will call our meeting back to order again. This time, Dr. Cox.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jones. We're now at item 7, new business, down to item F, which is the closing of Bluntville Elementary. This was requested to be back on the agenda. I would just simply repeat the recommendation that I gave you before, and that would be to close Bluntville Elementary at the end of the current school year, with the students who attend that school being rezoned to attend Holston Elementary or Central Heights Elementary, with the specific attendance zones or boundaries to be determined later this spring.
You've heard the recommendation from Dr. Cox to close Bluntville Elementary School at the end of this school year, and this is a reconsideration of the motion that was made last month, so it's not amendable. So closing of Bluntville at the end of this school year, and we'll have a motion.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hughes makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Dr. Rouse seconds the motion. So any discussion on the motion to close at the end of this school year?
Since I brought it back, I want to make just a real brief comment. I'm not going through all the math I did last time. I know everyone got it. I'm not going to bore you with that, but if you have a question about it, I'll try to answer it. I would just point out that keep in mind when you vote that, like we were talking about with the road, where we're looking out for what's best for the students in the long run. Think about the heating and cooling system in one school versus the other. You have a nice HVAC system in Holston. It's a brighter building. It's much better shape. I remind you that when I went through Weaver's after we'd closed it and the furniture was out of it, I was ashamed that we had allowed students to remain. So outside of all the mathematical and financial benefits, at the end of the day, it's what's best for the students. And this time next year, I think that they would tell you that. Thank you.
Any further discussions?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
I'll try to pull this out because it's breaking my neck reaching over it. So I'll go ahead and talk the same thing I basically said at the work session. I guess I should do as Mr. Hughes said. I've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. When we talked about this at first, we knew there was a cost savings, but I don't think that should be our primary goal. I understand that we're looking at cost savings. I understand we're looking at closing the building. All we've done is delay it for a year. It allows the community, the students, the staff, the ability to have the conversations they need to have. It allows them to adjust to it. I thought that last month, if we did it last month, I thought it would be way too quick. I thought only 4 months would be way too quick. Now that we've waited a month, I can't imagine how 3 months is going to be better. I think it makes it much worse. I don't know how many of you got different emails. I did get the comment that the one lady made, and I mean, I can understand the sentiment there is like, the school board lied to us. We're going back on their vote. I don't like putting something in place and changing it back, and the only reason we can give is because it saves us money or that we can give a bigger pay raise. I understand that one building may look better than another. We went through the building and there was some really nice classrooms there. I mean, I would not be ashamed of having my child there. I mean, I know that it's going to be something that's going to close in another few months. But I just don't think it's the right thing to do to tell everybody this is what we're doing. They already had some conversations. They had the staff basically really excited about it. They all sent us 29 of them signed a letter and says, please don't do this right now. I think the COVID year, the last thing we need to do on the COVID year is add one more stressful thing. When the people in that building are telling us that the kids are already traumatized by everything going on, and they're giving us the guidance from them that it's not the right thing to do right now, I just can't support doing it. And again, I want to give the pay raises, I really do, and I think we will. And if we slow down and don't give the pay raise we could actually give additional because we didn't close Bluntville, that money's not going away forever because we're gonna still close it in a year. So it's not something that has to happen right away. We can still have it there for next year. Again, I'm not gonna continue beating the same drum. I just don't think it's the right thing to do, especially with even shorter notice, telling people, oh yeah, by the way, in 3 months, your building's closed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to rebut. I would remind Mr. Iverson that 3 months is adequate time to put children in a better environment, safer environment. I had emails from teachers who said it should be done. Did have a few, two to be exact, that asked us to wait, but those are not students that's been in this the other environment. As far as the savings you talked about, you're putting, we won't realize the savings from closing the school for a year after the fact. So we're going to put that off another year. And it's not just about money. It's about money and the safety and security of the children. It's not a good environment. The school is way past when it should have been closed. I didn't go when you toured it, but I'd been through it a few other times. And I wouldn't say it's as bad as Weaver's, condition-wise, but the environment we will be moving those students to is much, much better. And I think we look at both of those things, the financial benefit plus the benefit for the students. And some of those same people that would say, don't do it this time next year, they'll say, thank you. That's what happened in some other cases. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Rouse?
when I got elected, someone who's become a dear friend of mine, Dr. McIntyre, who was director of schools in Knoxville and now works for UT, he told me to I asked him, I said, do you have any advice for me, him having been a director of schools? And he said, yes, I do. He said, you need to always remember that you work for the students of Sullivan County. They can't vote for you, but that's who you work for. And you need to always remember that. It's not the parents, it's not the teachers, it's the students that you work for, and they don't vote and they don't pay you, but that's what you need to remember. So I actually wrote that down, and it's one of those little things that I keep in front of me. So I do think that we're giving the students at Bluntville a better environment than what they're currently in. And I also think, and I'm not going to beat this horse either, Mr. Iverson, because we've talked about this. I've been through it from every direction. But it's true, and I'm not simplifying it. Please don't think I'm simplifying it. But it's like pulling off a Band-Aid. And do you want the Band-Aid pulled off quickly? Have the quick pain and it's over, or do you want the long, pull it off slowly type? But I would just like to say that my vote is based on what I feel is best for the students.
Thank you, Dr. Rouse. Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess, I get what we're saying about closing it. It's the money. Mr. Hughes, I know, said something about it would affect the raises. Okay, we said it was $200,000 to run the school, $10,000 for the chiller. The other schools we're closing, to me, I think Mr. Hughes said something around $1 million is what we'd say by closing Bluntville, if I'm correct. I may be wrong on that. If I am, correct me. But does that mean that's what we're making off of these other schools? If that's the case, then to me, one more year to give Bluntville shouldn't affect our teacher raises. We all want teacher raises, we do. But me, from where I'm at, I get y'all, I understand the ripping the Band-Aid off, getting it over with, but the kids at Catcher and the kids at North that I know, that I see, this affects them. I mean, it does. Because I've seen it over there. My community's been hit the hardest, the worst. And we've had teachers and parents and kids ask for another year at Bluntville. One last time, one last hurrah. Unfortunately, Colonial Heights, Sullivan Middle, North, South, Bluntville Middle, they didn't get their hurrah this year. It was, wear your mask, you're not gonna go to school half the time. They get no final goodbyes. Let's give Bluntville that chance to do their final goodbye, their final year, for hopefully we have no mask, and hopefully these kids can get out and enjoy school, not have to wear a mask. Give them time to cope with this. I've seen it, I don't like it. I don't even like closing the school next year. But at the time, I felt like that was the best we could do for them. And I hope tonight we don't change that on them in a blink of an eye. And I will agree, I did get one email from one requesting to go ahead and close, but I only got one asking to go ahead and shut it down. That was it.
Mr. Robinson, I'll repeat those numbers for you. You were close. The projected savings for the electric and water was about $203,386.08. But the other projected savings that would come the following year were based on square footage closings. And if you went by the $15.50 a square foot that Richter assumed, it would be $1.9 million, $1,983,085.50. But based on experience, I've saw $10.89, so that'd be $1,393,277.49. But when you think about what Mr. Jones has been working on the Pay Equalization Committee, and if I'm wrong, please correct me because I'm just going from memory. But we expect maybe to get about 1.5 million, maybe, depending on the retirement incentive and who we have to, if the people we replace, whether we have to replace those jobs or not. That's an optimistic, probably, assumption. And you heard him say that it would take about 3.4 million to bring us up to just the regional average, and 5 something to bring us up to Bristol and Kingsport. So if you took what I'm trying to assume we might get at the end of the first year, we would almost come up with enough to meet what we want to do for the regional average. And I'm looking forward to one day giving a raise that's not 2%, a raise that covers more than just the price of insurance. Because I went back and looked at my notes when I helped with the budget last year. The cost of insurance last January went up substantially. So a lot of times, in many cases, depending on who you are and your family, you could get a 2% raise and really not realize, or maybe even get a pay cut. I've seen that happen on people's actual checks. So, and you're right. It's been a tough year, and it's not all about money. But at the end of the day, we're not just talking about money. In my view, we're going to put students in a better situation. And if we weren't, I'd ignore the money altogether. I hope I would. I guess I have a tendency to understand the math of things better than I do some other things, but I've really had a rude awakening going through some of the schools we closed last year: Bluff City, Holston Valley, Weavers. They look worse with the furniture out. And so I hope no one out there thinks it's just about the money. But it's always a component of everything we do, because, the electric company wants money, the water company wants money. It just takes money to operate. And I believe that we're putting all those students in just a much better environment. And I try to look at things if it was my student, knowing what I know now. Now, when I was a young parent, there's many times I didn't see some things, but knowing what I know now, if I had a young student, I'd want them in that better facility, this facility, as opposed to the one we're taking them away from. Always going to be people that like to have one more year and a little more time, and I get that, and sympathetic to it as well, but strongly believe that this is the best option. But everyone makes a really valid point, and I hear what you're saying.
Any other comments?
One more, please. The one thing that I was gonna say, but I didn't at first, and I should have, and I apologize for making a second run at it, but, one of the students at South this past year, as we were talking about South closing, it was, I guess it was an emotional thing for her, and my daughter graduated from there too, so it's one of the things I was watching, but she said, this will be our last first. This is our last first year. So what do you mean? She goes, well, this is the last first day of school at South. This is the last first pep rally. This is the last first home game. This is the last first. And she was talking about everything just being really cool because it's our last first. And Sullivan South and Central and North, all, and I've got at least 2 or 3 of the shirts, are 40 years strong. I mean, Sullivan South, high school, 1980 to 2021, celebration of the years that they were open. And I know North did the same and Central did the same. I think that it's important for the community to have the ability to do those kind of things too, for these kids to have their last first. I understand all of the money part of it, I really do. I just don't think it outweighs the fact of giving those people one more year. So I'll stop at that.
Any other comments? If not, roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Ireson?
No.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
No.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
No.
Motion passes 4-3. The Bluntville Elementary School will close at the end of 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We move now to item G, which is House Bill number 48. And again, I'll just briefly recap. House Bill 48 is, the patron of that is Representative Hawk, who has submitted this legislation basically to redirect the sports bet gaming revenues toward public school construction and maintenance projects. So the resolution before you is a joint resolution that was first considered by Hawkins County. It was cooperatively passed by the Board of Education in Hawkins County and the Hawkins County Commission. And so this was shared among my superintendent's group. Also, Mr. Spivey had requested that we consider it this evening. And if you'll notice, it is being a complete copy of the Hawkins County resolution. It does suggest passage by the county commission as it did in Hawkins County. Excuse me. I would just like to recommend this evening, certainly that you would consider this and pass it, but also just a slight variation. Should the county commission here fail to endorse it, that we would send it on just with the school board endorsement, so that we would invite the county commission to join this, but if they were not inclined to support this, that it would stand on its own with support from the school board, and we would forward it just with the endorsement of the school board. So that's my recommendation, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. You've heard his recommendation, and it's really twofold, that we pass it as either a standalone or in collaboration with the county commission. And this does require signature of all board members, I believe, is the way we normally do resolutions. So we'll sign the one that's a joint resolution with the county commission tonight. But should they decide not to endorse it, then we'll come back and get you to sign a regular one. I'm assuming that it would pass. So I will entertain a motion then to pass the resolution.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Spivey makes the recommendation. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Iverson. Any questions? Roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Ireson?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Thank you. So the final item on our new business agenda is I'm requesting that the board would adjust the current year calendar, the 2021 calendar. As I alluded to earlier, with the news of the vaccine coming, we inquired to the state about how we might be able to use some of our 10 bank days for inclement weather in order to use those days for the vaccination clinics. We will be announcing tomorrow the specific dates, but it would include at least one school day for each of the doses. And in order to do that, I was advised by the Tennessee Department of Education that we would need to request of them to turn one of the inclement weather days into a professional development day, which is vaccinations are allowable under that. So it's basically the way the law is written to do that. So as you can see in your board packet here this evening, I do have a response. Tennessee Commissioner of Education Penny Schwinn has signed that granting permission. So in order to complete that, I'm asking this evening that the board would designate those 2 days as professional development, and would also ask that you undesignate specifically what days they are. I have a good idea of what the specific days would be, but should there be something that would happen with the supply of vaccine and we'd have to change that, then we would have to hold up, and we wouldn't want to have teachers and staff go unvaccinated because we couldn't have a board meeting. So again, my recommendation this evening is to respond to Commissioner Schwinn's permission and designate 2 of the banked 10 days as professional development days for the purpose of having our school staff vaccinated for COVID-19.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Iverson makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Rouse, Paul Robinson makes the second. I heard 2.
Robinson.
Mr. Iverson makes the motion. Mr. Robinson seconds. And what we will be doing is changing the 2 days to professional development days. And I've asked Dr. Cox that if this passes to get the word out to the parents as quickly as possible so that they'll be aware that these changes will be coming, and that may come as early as tomorrow as far as the exact dates. But recognize also that if there were to be a problem, we would have to change it back and move it to a different date. So when the announcement goes out, it will say that this is contingent on our having the actual vaccinations, right?
Yes, the actual vaccine.
Vaccine, yeah. Any?
Just one comment. Dr. Cox, if the dates that you're looking at fall through, I'd ask you to look at a Friday, because I've heard that the second dose of that can sometimes leave people very sick.
That is what we're looking at.
Okay. I know already, but if you had to change it, so thank you.
Any further discussion?
This is for everybody in our school system.
Yes, for all school employees.
Including active substitutes, support staff?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, it's a professional development day, but that means support staff would be reporting back to work after they got their shot that day or after they got the vaccination and so forth. So in case there's a question about that, I mean, it's not a vacation day or anything. Yeah.
I hope on the second shot we are lenient with our staff because of some of the side effects.
Well, that's why we would
I hope that,
we would have them on at the end of a week.
Okay, I get that, but he said they'd report back to work after. I hope we would allow them to go ahead and leave and they'd still get their pay.
Yes.
For the rest of that day.
If they need to.
Instead of having to use vacation or sick.
Right. Oh, yes, if they need to. Because there may be some sickness or something of that nature, but most of the reports we've heard have been good so far. I don't think we've heard any negative, but the second shot, some people have had some reactions.
The onset of any symptoms are generally several hours after the shot. I mean, of course, that varies from person to person, but usually I'm hearing, the next day is when you usually, if people are going to have symptoms from the second shot.
And Dr. Koch is going to organize it so that it'll be alphabetical part of the way so that they'll know when they're going. I mean, it's not a matter of having to go and
Yes.
get in line that long. I mean, they may have to wait some, but it will be alphabetized so that they'll have an idea of what the time frame is. And I intend to get mine that day too, whatever. Because we're part of remember, we're part of the team. So let's not forget that, if you not have one already. Any further discussion? Ms. King, roll call.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Rouse?
Yes.
Mr. Spivey?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Iverson?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, that does conclude the new business portion of the agenda.
Okay. That brings it down to my comments, and I think most of mine have been made earlier tonight, and I do appreciate your indulgence in hearing my concerns and my endeavors this past week. But two things that of significance. Next work session will be on February the 25th, and the next board meeting is scheduled for March the 4th. And with that said and done, I will,
What was that first date, Mr. Jones?
February 25th,
And then March.
March 4th,
Still here?
still here unless something happens. This has worked out, the communication is better here. It's a good facility, and we don't want
You
another
can hear
encounter.
better here.
We don't want to encounter another thing like we had at Central where the technology was not coming through right and so forth. No one's fault, it just happened.
Do you know the status of the boardroom as far as that being used?
It's still being used by the health department.
Okay, so it's like a phone bank, okay. So we don't have any
Yeah.
idea, and that's fine,
I think for the foreseeable future, until we get through probably the vaccines, it's still going to be needed for use by the health department.
I'll start
Mr.
with
Jones, with setting the meetings, may I have a word?
Okay.
We've been approached by Chris McCarty and some others to participate in a lawsuit. I don't know if you saw that, against some of the manufacturers of vaping devices. It's a
Juul.
national thing.
It's specifically the Juul company.
Right.
Yes.
And that attorney can come and talk to us from California. He has several other systems in the area, and he's going to be in the area. So unless there's an objection, I'm going to ask that he be on the agenda and just sort of let you know that he would be here to talk to us about that.
Be no cost to us if we win. If they win, then we would participate in the settlement, the way I understand it.
Right, and I talked with him today, and it was very educational for me, and I'm sort of clueless, I guess, but at any rate, I wanted to, before I told him to come on, I wanted to make sure there was no
I would
problem.
prefer you do it at the work session if possible, if the 25th.
Well, I think that would be better, and I suggested that, but it's a little bit dependent on his schedule. I don't think he's gonna make a trip.
No,
I mean,
that's-
probably would just
Right.
for us, but
We either want to work, I just,
yeah.
And he did indicate that he could also do it remotely.
He could
Yes.
Zoom it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be better if he were here, and that's what I told him. But at any rate, just to sort of lay that groundwork.
okay. I'll start with Mr. Spivey over here for comments from board members.
Well, first, I'd like to thank all the students. It was mentioned earlier, but in the 5 years I've been on the school board, my favorite thing every year is School Board Appreciation Week. And not because we're appreciated, but just because normally when it's not COVID time, we get to meet with kids and they get to give us this stuff. And we get to actually focus on what this is about instead of arguing or deciding issues that we as grown-ups screw up so much. So we I always like getting the pictures and the cards and the emails. We got tons of emails from students, and they always do a great job. So it always helps me remember what's most important, even if it's not popular, to make decisions. And that kind of leads me to one thing I want to explain. I mean, I'm not always right, and I think I was wrong last month when I voted to delay this closing. And let me explain. I let the emotion of the situation, and frankly, Mr. Iverson's explanation, I thought he did a good job. He convinced me last month. I still don't disagree with any of his points. I'm not saying this to debate him in any manner, and Mr. Robinson's right as well. It's just at the end of the day, when I weighed everything out being equal, I thought that this was the best decision for the nearly 9,000 students of Sullivan County, and I didn't want to let the emotion of, a long-standing school with a small student population keep the whole system from potentially benefiting when we knew the foregone conclusion. So for that, I take responsibility. That's part of what I think we all should do, and that's why I'm trying to explain it. It's not to justify it. It's just to tell you my thought process. Now, something more positive I'd like to highlight, and I hope the media will put out there as well, is there are a lot of exciting coaching positions out at the new high school. I've been asked about that a lot. There are a lot being posted now, so be on the lookout for that, and I hope you'll always monitor that. I know during COVID times, we have so many things that are usually easier to recognize because we're all out and about, but I would encourage anybody interested to look into that. Finally, something else positive, I think I want to thank, I haven't called him myself, but I want to thank Representative Hawk for proposing this lottery amendment and to explain, if people hadn't watched the work session and the resolution we passed, and I saw from this county's leadership was the new online. There's a lot of funds that are going to be coming into the state's coffers, and as part of the lottery statute, most all of the dollars from that go to education, but they go to higher education above K through 12, which is a great and laudable goal. I think our public schools need more of those dollars because that's the only way you get to higher education is to complete the lower education that we mandate as a government, but we, for some reason, don't want to pay adequate dollars for. So anything that gets more dollars to public education, and this is on the forefront of this new online gambling, and I really think if school boards across the state and commissions are in unison on this and would be supportive of Representative Hawk's bill, I mean, how as a legislature could they look at the community and say, no, we don't want our public education to have dollars for renovation and ongoing maintenance, which is always the hardest thing for any school district to get. But if you look the last 3 or 4 years in Sullivan County, you'll see real how hard it has been for us to get. Because we don't have a budget for that, folks. We have a zero budget from our county commission. So anything we can do to promote that, I support it, and that's why I had asked to put this on, and I'm really happy that everybody supported it.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Mr. Robinson?
I don't have a whole lot. Just, sorry to Bluntville, and I think I left Sullivan Central out on that last year. Sorry about that. I know Iverson had mentioned the shirts for the schools that's closing. If you all are selling shirts with your years, shoot me an email or a phone number, call me. I'd like to purchase one of the shirts.
I think the Cougars have one that says the last ride, I believe is what it says.
South's got them, and I heard North does too.
Yeah, so, I've got one.
Okay, yeah.
Mr. Iverson?
I guess I'll say 2 things. Sorry, Matthew, I wasn't able to convince you this time. So I hate that for the people at Bluntville. Sorry, Bluntville, I let you guys down. I thought we had it for you, but I understand. I'm really happy that our health department's got with our with our Department of Education, that they're going to do the shots. I think that's fantastic. I know our teachers are excited to hear that. I think it's great for us to have found a way to do that, and thank you, Dr. Cox, for finding that way of doing that. That's a really good thing. That's it.
Mr. Hughes.
I'm like Mr. Spivey. I agree with what he said. I'm not always right either. But I think collectively, usually we are. And even when we disagree, I really respect and appreciate everyone's opinions, because collectively I think it's a very smart group of people, and I think we are trying to do the right thing, and I think most of the time we do. And when we don't, we always try to correct it, I think. But I'd also like to thank the students for the time that they've spent with the emails and the pictures. I love the pictures. I've got a big one last year. I still got it at my house. It's going to be framed. It's amazing the talent we have among these young students. And so if you took the time to send an email or to do something for us, we appreciate it, and we take the time, and I finally get around to reading every single one. So thank you.
Was I right on the emails that the students sent us, we could not respond back to them?
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's my understanding. Dr. Rouse?
I'd just like to say, as a school board appreciation week, I've always been on the other side recognizing the school board. So it's been a pleasure being on this side.
Which side's better?
This side.
Depends on the day. Depends on the day. But I would like to say that I appreciate being part of this team. And I do feel, even though we do disagree, but that's what a good team does. You bring out the best of the other person by having them think through things and look at other sides of things. So I do appreciate being part of this wonderful group of people. I'd like to also say thank you to the teachers, the principals, and the students for everything that they have sent to us, the emails, the pictures, and I just got to put this up to make sure, Mr. Flanagan, make sure you get this, because I think it's a good indication of that Dr. Rouse and her glasses. So thanks to everybody.
Mr. Gilmore?
So yesterday I went to run at what was formerly Bluff City Middle School, and when I parked, Chris Lazier saw me and said, "Come in." And you would not believe he has replaced the lighting, he's replaced the flooring, the heating systems, the windows. I went to my former classroom because I was a teacher there. There was wrestling going on, and I told them it's not the first time wrestling has taken place in this classroom. I think he told me he had 8 nonprofits there. Just remarkable. He's done everything and more that he said he was going to do, and I understand he's done the same thing at Holston Valley already. So at some point, I trust that the board will be invited to see, when he gave that presentation, it was such an impressive presentation, but he has delivered. And like I said, it was just I just went there to run. I used to teach there and used to run that loop a lot, and I just happened to go there and happened to see him, and he said, "Come on, let me show you what I've done." So just a shout out to Chris Lazier for what he's done for that community and for all the nonprofits that he's hosting, all the kids. He's got a weight room in there for kids. The gym was full. Also, they were doing basketball drills and things in the gym. So I just hope that if you get a chance to publicly acknowledge Chris Lazier and the work he's done, both there and Holston Valley.
If I could, can I piggyback on that? Because that was actually what I was going to talk about, and then I got off on School Board Week at Appreciation, and I forgot what my intent was when I arrived here. I was able to go and do a walkthrough of Holston Valley last Friday. Chris had texted me and invited me to come. He wasn't able to meet me after all, but his associate took me through. They have completely redone the floor at Holston Valley. They're completely redoing what would have been the 7th grade hallway when I was there, but the front old side, new ceiling, new paint, new floor, and that's going to be an after-school program. The back hallway, he already has a lady in there from a foundation getting ready to do work with 2-year-olds through 5-year-olds. And like you, it is just amazing what he has already done. There's also a conference room that they're getting ready to do at Holston Valley. And I asked, well, if we wanted to have a meeting out here one day, could we do that? And she said, oh, sure, as soon as we get it finished. So that's an opportunity that if we ever want to get away to some place that just different, that would be an option. And I'm sure he would have the same thing, opportunity for us at Bluff City. But it's great what's going on.
Don't you just love it when people carry through with their promises? So.
It is awesome when people do that.
Any final questions or comments from anyone? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second. I guess we stand adjourned.